City Council meeting for Alpine, Utah for July 12th. We will start with a roll call, starting to my left with Councilman Thielen.
Jason Thielen, present.
Greg Gordon, present.
Kelly Law, present.
Lon Lot, present.
Jessica Smuin, present.
Okay, Jessica is, are you zooming in, Jessica, or just calling?
Zooming,
Okay.
but don't have enough bandwidth for video.
Sorry. Okay. We will start with the prayer by Lon Lot and then a pledge led by Councilman Gordon.
Our Heavenly Father, we are grateful for this beautiful day, grateful for the opportunity to be here in this wonderful city, this wonderful country, in this beautiful world. We're thankful for the opportunity to serve our fellow men and to work together to make this community a better place. We pray that tonight we will have a sense of understanding and the ability to discuss things civilly and within reason. We pray for those who are suffering from loss and difficulties in their life. We ask that we'll be directed in how we can help in these areas. We're thankful for all that was given us, and we ask this in Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and we'll go into our work session with item A, mass gatherings.
So we just wanted to have a discussion on this. Here's my mic. We wanted to have a discussion on this just to see where the council stands as far as what type of events you'd want to allow, particularly I think at Creekside Park. We've had requests for anywhere from somebody doing a 5K to like a fundraiser or something for a foundation. Sometimes they want to have vendors, sometimes they want to have food trucks. We don't really have specific requirements built into our policy for mass gatherings for those things. So we thought if we could have a discussion on this, and I think Austin has some things to go over. We get a feel for where the council's at, and then we can make some adjustments and bring them back for approval.
Yeah, okay, so what you see on the screen here, maybe I'll try and zoom in a little bit more. I'll just go like this. Okay, so this is our mass gathering ordinance. You can see that there's certain activities that just automatically qualify as a mass gathering. So any type of fair or festival, any race, any parade or a concert, all of those automatically become mass gatherings. Now, there are other types of activities that they don't necessarily become mass gathering until they meet like a certain threshold. And so that's what you see down here in these two boxes. And so we categorize them into two different categories. We have private and public type of events. And so for private ones, you know, and these can be, you know, they're kind of at our discretion. So, you know, the first bullet point there causes significant public impact. So, you know, what does that mean? But well, if we feel, I guess if we feel like it's going to have a significant public impact, we'll make them go through the mass gathering process. Typically, more often than not, we tend to err on the side of, you know, if we feel like it's going to disrupt things, then it probably is a mass gathering. And so other bullet points here, it disruption of normal routine of the community or affected neighborhood, necessitates the use of city personnel, or necessitates the need for any type of street closure. So any private event that would have any of those things would become a mass gathering. For public events, it's anything that has over 250 or more people. Substantial use of a city park or building that necessitates the need for any type of street closure, the use of amplified sound, and then the inclusion of food or vendor booths. So those are kind of the criteria. The most recent mass gathering application that we've received would be for an event. They want to do it at Creekside Park, and they would have live music. They would have food trucks. There would be vendor booths. And so that obviously checks many of those boxes. And so, you know, at what, I guess what we're trying to get at is, you know, a couple of years ago, I think it was, we had the BYU marching band come and play at Creekside Park, and the neighbors did not like that. So we're just trying to figure out, you know, where do we draw that line in the sand? What is the council okay with, and what is probably not okay to be going on in our parks? Or just around the city in general, I guess. And so let me just kind of, so typically the way that these work is they're approved at a staff level. So you can see down here the submission requirements. So they'll usually submit an application. They'll come and meet with city staff, which would be on a Monday morning at the DRC meeting. They'll kind of run by us what their plans are, you know, if they're going to be closing any streets, they'll tell us about that. You'll notice the, let's see, the sixth item down there, police chief. So the police chief does have to sign off on all of these. You know, just it's good to have that on their radar. And sometimes, like these races, they do need to close some of the streets and stuff like that. So police assistance might be required. There are fees associated with mass gatherings. So for large events, we make them deposit $1,000 deposit for cleanup. They're supposed to clean up, but if they don't, that's what that deposit's there for. Races in Lambert Park, they have a larger fee than a standard mass gathering because it would close the whole Lambert Park. And then also we do require that they provide liability insurance. So, and that I believe is a policy for like $1 million. General aggregate limit is typically what we require on that. Let me just see, let's go to the next page. And so we do have some provisions in our ordinance that allows, you know, if we felt like an event wasn't going to be appropriate or it was getting out of hand, there is a provision in here that the city administrator or the police can revoke a mass gathering if they feel that that's needed. And in an event like that, you know, typically whoever the person was that was causing the issue, you know, it'd be put on a list that they couldn't do any more mass gatherings. Advertising, they are allowed to advertise the event, but only after we've given them permission to do it. So before that, they can't advertise it until we formally said that it's okay to have the mass gathering. Let's see here. So another thing that they're required to submit is a site plan, which is, you know, a map of the event so that we know where everything is going to happen. So they'll have, you know, they'll show where the restrooms are going to be, the start and end points if it's a race, entrance and exits, where the first aid locations will be, you know, where the vendor booths will be. All those types of things need to be shown on a map so that we have that on file. Parking is always a concern, and usually we make them explore their options. If there's not enough parking at a venue, we may ask that they do shuttling. And so we've had to do that a number of times in the last couple of years on some of these events. Amplified sound. So anytime there's amplified sound, it would automatically, even if it was a small gathering, but if they were having, you know, large amplified sound, it would be deemed a mass gathering. Because we don't have a noise ordinance, the way that this is written here, it says amplified sound is enforced by a reasonable person standard. So it's not measured, but just a reasonable person standard. Let's see here. And I think we pretty much covered the other stuff. So restrooms, food and vendor booths, trash disposal, those are the main things. So I guess we just kind of want to bring this here to the city council to kind of get a feel for, you know, are there certain type, based on what we have here, do you feel like this is okay? Are there certain events that might be occurring that maybe we don't feel like should be going on? Right now, it's like if anybody wanted a mass gathering, they could pretty much apply for it and technically
Have
do
we
that.
had issues? I'm just not aware.
I feel like there needs to be a little more in the policy so
More
that when
guidelines.
someone comes in,
Do you have a reason to
Ever-
say no?
that or there's just some things that aren't well defined. And, you know, we don't want to approve something and then have an elected official come and ask, well, why did you approve that? We like a little more in the policy on
The-
what is allowed.
The parade of homes, and you know, you never know how many more of those we'll have, but oftentimes they get pretty congested. I've always thought that's something that should go through this policy because anyway, it becomes kind of like a one-lane road sometimes and
Mhm.
but and so maybe that's worth putting in there, or there's just the parking has often been a challenge with some of those.
Yeah.
But that's all besides Creekside.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know though, Greg, on a Parade of Homes thing, if you're gonna see more than 250 people at a time at the home.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Not at one time. So that wouldn't necessarily comply
So
as
how
is.
how do you monitor
Yeah,
that one anyway?
Yeah.
yeah.
And-
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, they do have very set hours, right, on when that's happening and where, and the challenge has just been that it becomes a one-lane road. I've seen a number of
Yeah.
cases and, you know, you can't make it down and I mean, there's a few simple things they could do to mitigate that a little bit.
And, you know, on the parade, we did have a builder of one of the homes this year reach out to us to see if they could use a parking lot for some parking because it had been very congested during construction on this particular street. And he even called me during the parade and said, we're trying everything we can. People keep moving our stuff and parking here on the road. So they at least made an effort in this particular case, but I think a little bit of an offshoot to this is occasionally we get requests to film within the city and sometimes on city property. We really don't have any written policies there other than we require insurance. And so we're, as kind of an offshoot to this, we want to develop a film permit. William has done some research and found that a lot of cities have those and have kind of some policies that go along with it. You know, are they gonna have firearms, or they gonna have explosives, or are they gonna shut down roads and different things like that so that we could have some control. So,
Maybe you can clarify, so just with Greg's example of the Parade of Homes, would that be classified as a private event or a public event in this? That's kind of what I'm trying to understand. If the mass gathering is for private, I want to know kind of what a private is versus a public.
yeah, well, I had the same thought Lon did. Would you have 250 people there at one time?
So if I look at this, the public one says 250 people. Private option says causes significant public impacts, disruption of normal routine in the community or affected neighborhood. So if it's a private one, it might not, does it need to
Yeah.
have 250 people as well? Because I don't
It doesn't,
see that.
it's not showing.
It's true. And
Mhm.
I mean, I guess to compare and contrast a parade home versus say a wedding or something like that. The wedding's usually one night, the parade's for what, a week or 10 days, all day, and probably the weekends are busier. So
But would a wedding that doesn't have ample parking, so there's parking up and down the streets, would that need a permit?
We haven't we haven't had a request for one, and it's possible that people don't know. And I guess if we don't know, we don't know. So.
So again, I'm still confused, but let me ask you this: on a private event,
Mhm.
and I don't know what that, I'm kind of curious what a private event would be.
Mhm.
Do they have to get general liability insurance for their event at their house if it's on their property?
Don't-
We have had, there is a resident that we've had that had a large event at his home. He had people shuttled in and out. We did make him get a liability. And he did apply for the mass gathering, however, so he didn't just do it. But it was a large event that he did. They had shuttling, and he ended up having restrooms and he completed all of our requirements. But it was at a private residence for, people that were invited only. So that, in that regard, it was a private event. It wasn't just like he was doing it in a park where anybody could theoretically, participate in the event.
This one thing, it seems a little vague on the private one. I'd like it to be spelled out a little bit more,
Yeah.
just to say what would constitute having to get one versus not having. If it's 250 people, then add that to it. If it's something else, I don't know. My second question, my experience with it is, we had experience with religious groups wanting to do it, and they were frustrated having to do all this type of stuff for like a fun run, or
Mhm.
taking their youth down to Creekside for a get together, and it crossed over. Here it says that you give exceptions for funerals and religious conferences. Is that specifically tied to the church services in the church building, or is that?
I don't think it's really fleshed out in that
So
ordinance.
what's the definition of a religious conference?
I think we have one in there, do we?
I don't believe there's a definition within our ordinance for what that is, so.
And I think it could be any religion, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Mhm.
going in, but I mean, I feel like the reason I think we have this reciprocal with the churches in the community is because, they support the local community, whether it's, each arm takes turns, they sponsor the senior citizen dinners, they do a lot for the youth and whatnot, and I think it's kind of a reciprocal thing. So if you have somebody coming in from another community, would they be, are they exempt from that also then? And religious, I mean, anything can be religious. It doesn't necessarily have to be Christian,
Yeah.
pagan,
right.
you know what I mean? I think we need to kind of tighten that definition to make sure.
I mean, I agree with Carla. I like giving exemptions because we do use the churches around here for activities, Alpine days, things like that.
Or
It's
use
nice
their
to do.
parking lots for our
I
parks.
just want to know if it says religious conference, does that mean we can have a state conference, use state conference in Creekside Park, and they wouldn't have to get a permit? But
Well,
it
I
kinda seems
think-
like it could.
I thought the exemption, am I wrong that the exemption was for the fee? I thought they still had to apply, but we
It
didn't.
says
make them
exemptions
pay.
to the criteria would automatically apply to events such as funerals and religious conferences.
And it's not tied to.
So
fee.
it said, or in the sentence before that, it says Alpine city staff may grant an exception to these guidelines. So
That's anything.
if we felt like a certain event was warranted an exception, we could do that, I guess.
But then when it comes to religious conferences, they're automatically included based on the next line, right? So you can grant exceptions for lots of reasons. I like that there's flexibility,
Mhm.
but they're automatically going to apply here according to this for religious conferences, which I would assume would be a youth conference for that, or
So to me, a distinction in my mind would be, are they using city property for the event? If they are, I feel like they should have insurance. And it's typical to list the city as an additional assured, so we're covered.
I don't read that in here, but that would be good.
Yeah, I'm talking things we need to probably tweak.
The other thing I think we'd want to consider too is like if let's say a youth conference, they wanted to do it at Creekside Park and they're having these large events going on, that would have a significant impact on the park for, general everyday use. And so I think something like that where it's impacting someone that's not going to the youth conference, is the mother with her stroller taking her kid to the splash pad, it impacts them. And so I think those are what I think are trying to get across by saying a public impact.
So you want to change that is what you're saying? So that they're not automatically.
I think, if it's on private grounds, like a church grounds, I think maybe, we could make an exception, but if they wanted to use Creekside Park, I think in that instance, I think they should, in my opinion, I think they should probably go through the mass gathering.
Is this new to us today, or
process.
is this something that we're reviewing that has already been there?
That's current in the ordinance.
So back to Creekside then, because I think that's when this comes up quite a bit, right? I think we allowed it a year or two ago, right, with the symphony here, because we thought there was a community benefit. A 5K might have that same type of appeal, but it depends if someone's just hosting sort of a fair in that park that has, it's not really it's a regional draw. In, here, I think that's the type of thing we need to watch out for. I don't know how you differentiate. Maybe these come before council or something, or, or maybe we have some guidelines.
I like your idea of having a community benefit or, something the community, majority of the community would support.
And the calendar sometimes gets problematic. For example, our next meeting after tonight that's on the schedule is August 23rd. So, if someone came in tomorrow and our policy said you have to go through the council, it would potentially present a problem. But I guess what kind of brought this up, I think, or part of it is, say someone wants to have a family reunion, they want to have a band come in. Is that acceptable? Or someone wants to have a fundraiser for X foundation and want to have a band, want to have the food trucks. Is that acceptable?
Could the defining action in that be if it's an Alpine resident that wants to host those kinds of events, then that would be allowed, but we don't allow outside residents to host those events.
Hiram, off the cuff, do you see that it would be an issue to limit that to an Alpine resident?
I'd have to look into it a little bit more. I don't know if it technically would be, but I know there are ordinances out there that are limited to residents only, and I don't see them challenged very often. So I can look into it.
Well, in the same regard that we're considering our cemetery, and you have to be an Alpine resident, starting to look at, because we do have limited, space, we're very limited, and we have to consider how all of that's going to play out in the future.
So in that regard, there is our ordinance does differentiate between residents and non-residents when it comes to reserving a pavilion. For example, a non-resident would have to pay a higher fee to reserve a pavilion, but they still have the ability to do that. But we do differentiate in that regard in our current ordinance.
Similar to the cemetery plots.
Yeah.
And I just wanna, this is a really good idea. I like it a lot. And obviously there's a few things to clean up here, like you all pointed out. The only thing I would want to do in addition to that is just to make sure that it's constitutionally correct. Right? Like saying we're gonna, give an exception for religious conference, or saying that we can arbitrarily decide who gets to do this and who doesn't. I don't
Right.
think we could do that. We have to say, did you comply with this? And if you did, you can hold your gathering, whether it's something we agree with or not, I think if it's on public property.
Yeah.
So just to, I mean, I don't know if what we're doing here, if we're trying to come, we probably need to send it back, but on the last paragraph on section B, I don't understand, maybe you can explain this to me. It says, the Alpine city staff may grant an exception to these guidelines. Very first question I have is, what guidelines specifically are they referring to?
I would assume that those listed in the boxes above.
Okay, so up there, if they, if someone's on public and they have more than 250, okay, so that answers that. If that's, I didn't know what the guidelines were, but if the guidelines are those 4 or 5 things that make it become a mass gathering, then that explains that.
Yeah.
Maybe we just clarify that those are the guidelines, because it doesn't say anywhere above there that those are guidelines,
So we'll refer to a section.
meaning, yeah, the city staff can grant exception. And then the next one is, like I said, we need to determine exceptions to the criteria would automatically apply to events such as funerals and religious conferences. I agree. It needs to be constituted. I mean, if you're gonna say youth conferences can do it, some of these groups that go up in the mountains and have, this, I don't know, mystic experience up there, literally, they could come apply, and it seems like this ordinance requires us to grant them, grant them permission to do it. That's how I'm reading it, unless you're reading it some other way.
Okay, we can look into that. And yeah, this is just kind of a supposed to be kind of a thought stimulating discussion, so we can make some changes and bring something back. Another thought I had, just because I had to sign an application through Utah County for Alpine Days today, so we should look at their mass gathering requirements, because we as a city had to get a permit from them and see where that applies and make sure that that's incorporated and addressed in our ordinance, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
that's a really good idea.
Did they require a fee or anything?
yeah, I don't remember what, I think they did.
The fee thing needs to be cleaned up a little as well, because we have in the past had a school, if I remember right, a school activity that they wanted to have, and they were having a difficult time coming up with $500. And so we do need to determine what kind of costs are involved in the cleanup effort. If they, and we explained it to them before that it would be, if we have to send city staff out there and spend money to clean up after the event, that's what the fee is for. So I would say you would want to designate why the fee is required, what it would be used for, if there's any refundable parts of the fee, and make sure that it's clear that if it is going to be an exception, that the city staff can make an exception to the fee, why you would make that exception, or why you could make that exception, something like that.
Yeah, and we'll work with Craig and Hire. Another thought just crossed my mind about those bikers in southern Utah, that, was it 2 brothers that got killed
Yeah.
earlier this spring? They're on a city street. I assume that there was some kind of permit. Who does someone go after? It wasn't the city's fault that some crazy person hit them and killed them, but in the legal world, everybody gets pulled into it, it seems like. So and in the one case Austin mentioned, they were shuttling cars to this private event on private property, but they had asked to use city property to park cars so they wouldn't have the road plugged up. So I think that's a reason we would require insurance from them, because they were using, even though the party or event wasn't on city property, the parking was.
So Lon, I think most public entities, whether it's PTA or the schools or local churches, they all have insurance
Mhm.
that would, that, qualify for what we require.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's been an issue. I mean, I'm sure some of the fees are, but I think that's only, I mean, we only take such a large deposit just in case they just keep it a complete mess, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's pretty
And
minimal.
I don't think we use the school anymore for Alpine Days, any Alpine Days events, but when we did, we had to provide insurance to them for that.
Also, if some of these need police present, how do we approach that as far as the cost involved in providing officer for that?
I believe it says they have to pay, doesn't it? Here,
I was trying to find it.
I don't remember seeing that in here,
thought
but
that,
I think
it
that
could
needs to
be in
be
here and I
added if it's
just
not there.
didn't see it.
Going back to the Parade of Homes challenge under the private, is there a way to qualify it by saying, if it's not, because you're worried if it's not 250 people or more, but you could say within a 12-hour or 24-hour period. I mean, they are thousands of people and it goes on for days. And this would be the time to come in and add more guidance and regulation around that, because that does have such a significant impact. It's not just the parade. Those neighborhoods are going through, construction for a year or so. And, it's a drawn out process. So anything I think as a city we can do to help alleviate, those 2 weeks where you're almost gridlocked in your quiet neighborhood would be helpful.
on the cost of the police, I believe it's actually a fee within the police department, not the city, if an officer has to be, say, at an intersection to direct traffic for a race. So that could be why it's not directly in this ordinance.
So does it just need to reference what the current rate is for public safety?
I mean, we do.
Probably something that they would pay any applicable fees to the public safety district. So we can work on some amendments to this ordinance and bring it back for review. We have something in place that's worked. It just feels like there could be some improvement to it.
So Shane, it sounds like you would like to have language that allows staff to have something in writing, but that can be acted on in a timely
Yeah,
manner. Yeah.
if that and just, I think a little more detail on guidelines of what's allowed and what's not.
Right.
So that we're not having to make those decisions and then maybe be second guessed later of why we did, what's allowed, music, vendors.
So
food
Jason,
trucks.
is there anything, I'm just going down the line, is there anything specifically that you don't want or specifically that you do want included in the language here? that you want to see?
Nothing with what I've said.
Okay, Craig?
No, just that, it is hard, right? If we allow the park to be used for one charity, but not the next, that can seem arbitrary, or one race and not another, right? So we've got to be somewhat consistent. I think the way we've done this is basically said no to almost everything, right? Yeah. So, and that I think generally works for us, but I think there's, some things we wouldn't mind having. Maybe it's just spelling that out, that maybe has some sort of community benefit, but we could probably, rent out all of Creekside Park almost every week, right? For
Yeah.
something, so.
And we have used the exception clause to say, yes, we'll do this. If it doesn't work out, we won't do it again. You know, kind of that approach since we didn't have the detail. So, and I don't think we've had a wreck other than maybe the noise from the marching band or whatever it was.
Yeah, surprisingly, I've never really gotten complaints other than
Yeah.
that. So, yeah,
When was the marching band? Was that recent?
A couple of years ago.
I think it's been a couple years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kelly, did you want any
Nope.
direction, give any direction?
That's not good.
Lon? So if you guys can think of anything within the next week, please get a hold of Austin and let him know, give him your notes. Is there anything else you guys wanted? Are we ready to
I
move
think we're
on?
good.
Okay. With that being said, let's move on to item 3, which is the consent calendar. Are there any questions for the consent calendar?
I don't know if the changes that we requested last time were put on mine. So if, my only thing would be to add my changes from last time.
For the
Bonnie?
minutes.
Yeah, for the minutes.
I made them already.
So you got mine. Made
Yeah, I
it
got
as
yours
well.
also.
Okay, so aside from the minutes, is there anything else?
I did email out resolution R 2022-32, the agreement with Central Utah Water Conservancy District. And Craig did review the agreement. He had comments on one section, and that's 10, where it talks about indemnification. They had who indemnifies who in
Reversed.
situations reversed. And so I've sent that comment back. And in the resolution, Craig said that you approve this agreement essentially in this form or something like that, so we can take care of those little issues. So.
Shane, I had one question on that. So we have an allocated allotment of water from there. What happens if we need more? Can we pull more from that system and pay, in line or?
So they have kind of a system where if we don't use all of it one year, we can kind of hold some over for the next. And it's a little bit of a loose system, but they do it with all the cities that have CUP water. So if we get in a bind, they'll do what they can to help
Okay.
us.
But if we used all of it for the year by August or something, and we still used it, what happens? Then we're not supposed to use anymore?
Yeah, I mean,
It
they
turned
have a totalizer in the pump station, so they know how much water has came our way. And they track that, and we're actually working with them now so that we can get that information into our SCADA system. So we'll directly know without having to call and get a report on it. But if they could let us, say we have 770 and we use 850, it's possible that we could work out with them to kind of use maybe some of our water for next year or something.
I see. Okay.
There's a little bit of flexibility.
You don't pay, you just shift. Or this year, and so let's say we haven't used it until, about last week or something. In
Mhm.
theory, we still have all of that we can use in the hottest months or something, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. If we were to use more, how the pay would work. I'm not sure on that, if they just kind of bank it and take it off the allocation for the next year that would be paid in that next year. I'll have to find out on that.
And then do we have anything in our water rates to adjust to that if we do have to pay for it?
So the thought process right now, and we need to use this water for a year and see how everything works out. But the thought process is the cost of this is close to equivalent to what we would pay to pump the Healy well. And so it's figured as a little bit of a wash, like nothing changing, other than we updated our PI rates that should be back at this next meeting. And it's considered in there, so.
Is there a reason it's not at today's meeting?
Because Fred was out of town,
Okay.
so that's why. And we don't have the final document. We needed a notice of public hearing that we agreed to have, so.
Mayor, on the pump station though, are we feeding back in the spring, in the winter,
Not yet, but that's all still being worked on.
negotiated?
Mhm.
It, so is that meter gonna be metered backwards as well?
It has the ability to read
Okay.
reverse flow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, Mayor, do have a question on the the approval of the rate study. Fill us in on that one a little bit more as we're doing all these rate studies. What's this one for in comparison to what we've been doing?
So we just finished the pressure irrigation rate study. And now we wanted to look at the culinary water and sewer rates to make
Okay.
sure that we're covering our costs. We've got a brand new culinary water capital facility plan that this council approved. We have a draft that the council has not seen for sewer for that capital facility plan update, that it should be on the next meeting as well. And so we're just making sure that our rates are where they should be, or maybe they need to be lowered. I don't know. But
Okay.
this would determine what needs to happen there.
Can I mean, just, I was a little confused about that too. So with this rate study, obviously they're doing the study for us. Do they bring it back to us and are we going off these rate studies, or at what point does the city council make determinations on these studies?
It'll be the same process as the pressure irrigation rate study, but it should be much less complicated. So Fred would look at all of our data, look at future projects, all those things, all of our O&M costs, propose kind of a rate structure. He would meet with staff, go over it, get any questions that he needs answered from staff. We'd get it to a point we feel comfortable that it should be presented to the city council. And he would be here to give a presentation on that.
So how do those work together? So we have our pressurized irrigation rate study, and we now are having our culinary rate study. Obviously, we have individuals using culinary for their landscaping.
Mhm.
That there's an overlap there.
Yeah.
And the question is, are they paying enough for the culinary based on the usage when compared with the pressurized irrigation rate study?
Right, and that's one thing that he would look at is those, I've explained that we have two situations. We have people that don't have pressure irrigation available, that use 100% culinary, indoor and outdoor water. And then we have those that have pressure irrigation, and it's mainly indoor water that's used. So that would be considered. They're likely, like right now, we have two different rate structures for those situations. And I would anticipate the same thing in the future. So, and we have situations where water has to be pumped multiple times. That would be something else that would be considered in the study as well.
So in the culinary one, then, are they gonna say what the expectations are for those who are not able to get the pressurized irrigation? I mean, obviously, there's limits and increases in the pressurized irrigation based on your lot size and usage,
Yeah,
as well as duration. You know, they turn it on and off at certain times. Culinary doesn't have some of those same limitations. How do we, are they gonna come and present to us, this is what a standard house is, everything above this is pressurized, or not pressurized, landscape
Mhm.
use? Let's look at the difference between the two. And I guess that's an area that I've never really been able to understand. Well, I love them to walk through.
Yeah.
That rate structure for culinary versus pressurized for landscaping.
yeah, and really that, where that typically comes into play is your stepped or tiered rate. So, maybe it's 0 to 8,000 gallons is the first tier. That's your typical indoor use. And then 8 to 12 or whatever, I think it's 8 to 12 right now, would be in the next tier, and it would step up with higher use.
My ask would be when they come back to just kind of explain that in a very simple way to us so we
Yeah.
can, because I still have not been able to understand that. It'd be
Yeah.
nice
Yeah,
To see that, the numbers and whatnot.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent calendar with the change in the minutes that were made as proposed.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Lott, seconded by Councilman Thielen to approve the consent calendar. We'll do a roll call vote, starting from Councilman Lott.
Lon Lot, yes.
Kelly Law, yes.
Craig Gordon, yes.
Jason Thielen, yes.
Jessica Smuin, yes.
Okay, passes unanimously. We'll move on to item 4 of the agenda, which is public comment. This is open to any residents or people that are present that want to talk about anything that is not on the agenda. Did we get anybody to fill out the forms, or is there?
I haven't received any cards.
Okay. Are you here for public comment? So it's nothing on the agenda, right?
No.
I'm sorry? It was on the consent calendar? Okay. Sure, come on up and you get 3 minutes for public comment.
I hadn't planned to speak tonight, I just came to listen, but I'm Eileen Miller. I'm with the Utah Valley Home Builders Association and the Parade of Homes. So surprised. Just to fill you guys in just a little bit about how it works with the parade. The home builder is responsible for the liability insurance on the property or the person that they built the home for, if it's a custom home that they build it for. So the actual property itself is covered with insurance. We've left it up to the builders, and I noticed when I visited the homes this year in Alpine especially, one home had a shuttle service, which was very nice, and it really cut down. And I was up here 2 or 3 times to that home, and there were no parking or traffic problems when I came through. The other one, however, that Raycom built, that was kind of way up high, maybe what could have solved that problem was to have somebody assigned by the builder down lower, because I drove on up and was plenty of parking up in, but people didn't realize that there was ample parking up in. So it's more a direction issue. We deal with cities all the time on, complaints about parade of homes and this and that, but everybody enjoys going to it. So we try to be good partners with the cities, and we try to mitigate the problems with the neighbors. And we usually leave that up to the builders to do their own PR work. And if there is a potential problem, they usually have it come up to the city council ahead of time. And then they work with the city, with the particular home, people that live around in the neighborhood, if there's going to be an issue. And there's usually always a resolution. As far as parking on the street, in a public street, it would have helped if there was a person directing the traffic. I do agree with that. And I just wanted to make one more comment on your IFA. That is what you were asking about your schedule. I am in a position where I go around to several different cities and I review several different schedules that have been drawn up by the different consulting firms. And I would have to say that Lewiston, Young and Robertson is an excellent firm, and their schedules that they give out are very self-explanatory. So as far as the acre feet per lot and everything, I think when Fred comes to explain that to you, that you'll understand it after. But anyway, interesting that I should come today because I was interested in the culinary issue, and then I get it here and there's 4 or 5 issues. So thanks for letting me speak, and I'll just continue to listen. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, did we get an address?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have let you know, name and address.
I'm just curious. If she-
Okay. Let's see, we have a brand new facility in Vineyard. And I can't remember the address of it. How about my home address?
Sure.
692 East, 100 North in American Fork. And I just have to say one thing about the marching band. I was a section leader, first chair flute and piccolo for the American Fork High School Marching Band. And right now, the band comes by my house every single morning, practicing before the heat comes. The residents have had to learn to live with it because we're so proud of the fact that we're such a wonderful, well-respected, nationally recognized band. So anyway, that for the noise. Just wanted to make that comment.
Okay. We, for item number 5 on the agenda, reports and presentations. We have a financial report. Is that you, Shane, or is
Yeah,
that? Austin?
Yeah, so this financial report's for June, and it's unlike other months, it's not quite complete because there's still invoices coming in for that last month of the fiscal year. But we made some adjustments at the last meeting to account for projects and things that we knew we had higher costs, and this budget in the budget column has been adjusted to reflect those changes. And everything looks like it will work out for this year. So I think we did the adjustments correctly, but it'll still take like another month for everything to be finalized. So we are working. There's kind of 3 pre-phases of our audit information that we provide to our auditor. We're in the middle phase of that, providing that information, and we should have our audit probably the end of August or first part of September. So, but everything's going really well.
Okay, any questions for Shane on the financial report? Okay, if there's not, let's move on to action discussion items. Item 6. Item A, annexation Box Elder South subdivision.
Okay, well, I will go ahead and introduce this item. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw up the plat here. This is the plat for the Box Elder South subdivision, so that we can just have that as a reference as I go through some of these points. So the Box Elder South subdivision is currently located in Utah County. It's in the TR5 zone. Acreage is 43.9 acres. There are 59 lots within the subdivision. Average size of the lot is 21,913 square feet. This item has been to Planning Commission. They spent a couple of sessions reviewing it. The last session, they did make a recommendation regarding this annexation, and they recommended that it be denied. Their motion, the reasoning behind their motion was, let's see here, that they felt that it did not meet the code and zoning requirements, that it sets a bad precedence, doesn't benefit the city, and brings potential liabilities. So moving on, our ordinance, our annexation ordinance specifically outlines 7 criteria that should be considered when an annexation is brought forth. And so the first of those is whether or not it is in the interest of the city to annex additional land at that time. 2, the capability of Alpine City to supply adequate municipal services to the area proposed for annexation, such as public streets, water, sewer, police, and fire protection, including what necessary improvements will be a requirement of the petitioners or owners of the property. 3, whether or not water rights will be required. 4, whether or not the proposed annexation is consistent with the city's general plan. 5, what conditions, if any, should be attached to the proposed annexation in order to provide adequate services, protect health and safety, or are necessary for proper implementation of the general plan. 6, whether as a condition and a requirement of annexation, an annexation fee will be negotiated between the city and the petitioners. And 7, such other information as may be required or necessary to understand and evaluate the application/petition. So those are the 7 criteria. They are just criteria for review. They're not requirements. So you don't have to meet, or it's not like you have to meet all 7 of those criteria to be annexed, but those are questions that the city council should essentially be asking when they review an annexation. Also, our annexation policy plan, which was adopted in 2017, by ordinance 2017-03 states that properties that are included in the annexation policy plan and map are not guaranteed an annexation request will be approved by the city, but rather that they may be considered. So this area, that being said, this area is part of the annexation policy plan. And so this, along with Pine Grove, another area commonly referred to as Schoolhouse Springs or Melby, is also in there. And then I believe there's one other property. And so, but this is part of the policy plan. Our annexation policy plan has looked at this, again, this was back in 2017 to consider, some of these things. What would the impacts be? Would it be the interest of the city? So some of those 7 criteria that we just covered, the first one is it of the interest of the city? That's really open up to the city council to interpret that. The second item, capability of Alpine City to supply adequate municipal services. So I think it's important to point out that the Box Elder South subdivision is served by the city in many regards. So they do receive garbage services. They also are on the same water and sewer system as the city. And so those are some services that are currently being provided up there. Technically, they're in the jurisdiction of the county sheriff. So law enforcement, that's not within our jurisdiction. Let's see, and then the county does do the snow removal up there. So that's not something that the city's currently doing. The third item that our ordinance outlines that we should look at, water rights. So this subdivision, as I said, is on the city's water system. It is above the elevation where we provide our pressurized irrigation. So they're on the culinary system. All of the water up there is on the city's culinary system. Water rights were provided when this subdivision was developed. And so that wouldn't be an issue. As far as the development being consistent with the city's general plan, if this property would have been originally developed within the city, they would have had a base density of 28 lots with a maximum bonus density of 35 lots. And so you can see with 59 lots, it doesn't exactly match up with our density requirements for that area. Let's see here. As far as the annexation fee is concerned, that's something that can be negotiated. In the packet, we included the staff did some research on a number of things that, just to give some idea of what could be potential costs. So there was the cost to, so for the Box Elder Way parking lot, which would be just right up here on the screen. If on the top of this, you'll see the road there, Box Elder Way. It's on the west side of this, on the left-hand side of the screen, top left corner, northwest. There would be a potential need there for a parking lot. We have one on the other side of Lambert Park. And so a similar thing, could be done here. That would be a cost. We did provide that estimate in the packet. Also provided in the packet are the cost of a Grove Drive realignment cost share with the Box Elder South subdivision. So what that is it kind of breaks it down, what that cost would be, and then what potentially if Box Elder South were part of the city, what would be their share of that cost.
Did that take into consideration that we did not get the grant for the culvert?
I believe that the grant was not considered in that,
Oh, okay.
in that estimate. Let's see here. So then also we did provide an estimate for for the Moyle Drive / Box Elder Way paving. So in the event that were to be paved, we have an estimate for that. And then also we provide an estimate for a pedestrian underpass for the Lambert Park Trail secondary access road. So that would be an underpass that would go underneath that access road for, a bike and hiker and pedestrian use in the Lambert Park. Let's see here. So as far as annexation fees are concerned, it should be noted that no sewer or water impact fees should be considered because obviously they're already on our system. So that wouldn't be something that should be considered as part of an annexation fee. As far as the lots are concerned, we looked at the lot width and area and just tried to see, how do these lots, as I mentioned earlier, there is more density up there than would be permitted within the city. So our adjacent zone for the city up in that area would be the CR 40,000 zone, which is a minimum lot size of 40,000 square feet, minimum width of 110 feet. In Box Elder South, on average, the lots are 21,913 square feet in size. There are several lots that have less than 110 square feet. Now, if we were to classify Box Elder South as a PRD, the lots would meet our minimum requirement of 90 feet of frontage. As far as building envelopes are concerned, so the city does have a code that limits building envelopes. So lots that contain greater than 20% slope would not be possible within the city. And so specifically lot 59, which you see on the screen on the top right of the plat there, contains greater than 20% slope. There are also other lots that contain areas of natural slope that are greater than 20% and would also require exceptions to city code. Let's see here. As far as the use is concerned, this is a single family subdivision, so which matches the city's use for the CR 40,000 zone, primary use of that zone. This subdivision is located in the wildland urban interface. And so as such, all of those types of requirements would apply. And the county does have wildland urban interface requirements. Let's see here. Our ordinance, we do look at, so when a new subdivision comes to the city, we look at trails. And if you see here on the plat, there's a area called Park A. So it goes down the east side of the property here, and then the south side of the property. And within that area, there is an easement for public access and trails. And so, were this to be annexed into the city, that area along the south and east would potentially become city public open space.
Isn't that where the huge berm is?
Yes.
It is, yeah. Let's see here. Okay.
Are you thinking is that in our master plan at all, or?
We don't have any master plan trails for that area, any future trails. It's not on the city, the trail master plan.
Okay.
The access road, so I think it should be pointed out. So this area, because it is in the wildland urban interface, that it is required to have 2 access points. It currently has one to the north, and then it has an emergency access way off of Box Elder Way, which goes through Lambert Park. That access road there does meet all of the requirements of a secondary access road. So if this were to be annexed into the city, it does not mean that would have to be paved or changed or altered in any way, because as it currently exists, it meets the secondary access requirements. And in your packet, there is a ruling from the 4th District Court in that regard. Moving on, the staff, we did look at potential a tax estimate for this subdivision. And so our annexation policy plan states it is not anticipated that tax rates would change when an annexation takes place. The burden on existing residents would be offset by the increase in property tax revenue paid on new buildings and by increased sales tax received because of the increase in population. In our estimates, we took 2021 numbers. And so we used those numbers because we had a complete data set for that. We also had the tax rates for that year. And so looking at those numbers, we, obviously know that things have changed, inflation has changed in the last year. And so these numbers, are an estimate at that point in time. But the overall net revenue would exceed the net cost of if this subdivision were to be annexed. Let's see here. Okay, so the area is, as I mentioned, is in the wildland urban interface. It's also in the sensitive lands or geologic hazard area. There were some studies done when this subdivision was developed. The county had some false studies done. And there were no fault lines where, typically you wouldn't allow a home to be built on a fault line. And so, as you could see, the county went through that process and this is what they approved. Utilities in general, our master plans have accounted for the sewer and culinary water. It's been master planned. And so that would not change if this were to be annexed. And as I mentioned earlier, the pressurized irrigation system does not serve this area. Streets, so moving on to streets, these streets were built, they actually do exceed our city standards. So our city standard is 54 feet of right of way. The streets in Box Elder South are 60 feet wide, or I should say the right of way is 60 feet wide. 5 feet of sidewalk, 6 feet of park strip, 2 feet of curb, and 34 feet of asphalt. With regards to streets, there are some street names up there that are kind of problematic that conflict with street names within the city. And so staff would recommend if this were to be annexed, that the street names be changed as a condition of approval. Moving on, we did also put together an estimate on the street component of that. It came out to about 8,500 would be, that would be for like street maintenance, snow removal, all of that all together. Let's see, traffic. There's really no pro or con in terms of annexation. We're going to have the cars on our streets regardless. So traffic is not an issue. Stormwater. So in 2012, there was the fire. And as we mentioned earlier in the meeting, there was the large berm that was built on the east side of the Box Elder South subdivision. That berm has been built up. It was initially installed at a lower level and then it was increased. Where it currently stands, it is staff's opinion that the area has been adequately protected with regards to stormwater. And we don't feel that any further action would be required in that regard. Moving on to the next point, open space. So there is a small, what I would call a pocket park there. You can see in the middle of the screen labeled Park B. That's 2.3 acres. It's isolated. It's located in the middle of all those homes. If this were to be annexed, the city, in staff's opinion, we don't have any interest in that being a public park. And we would recommend that be be deemed as a private open space, not to be maintained by the city's park department. We don't see any major benefit to having that open space as a public park. And so that pretty much covers what we reviewed in the staff report and also what was reviewed and discussed by the Planning Commission.
Hey, Austin, refresh my memory. There's 59 lots. So if they were to develop in the city and it was zoned, I'm assuming CR 20,000, which is half acre lots. With our slope ordinance, how many lots would have been allowed in that subdivision? Do you remember?
So we looked at it as if they had come in as a PRD, and so it would have been
Right.
28 lots.
Okay,
If it, and that would have been the base density. And then if they would have dedicated up to 50% as open space, they could have
Right.
gone up to 35 lots.
okay. So the max they would have had is 35 and they're 59 now, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Hey, Austin, is there anything stopping them from changing the names of the streets now? Like this says,
No,
they could change the name of streets now, if not to conflict. It's not a, like, they don't have to be annexed to change the name of the street.
I know that Jed's tried to have them changed a number of times, I think, with the contact in the county, and up to this point, we haven't had any progress in that regard.
Okay.
But
But there's
no,
no
there's-
legal reason they
no.
can't.
No, I don't think so.
it's just working with somebody in the county. So we do have a representative. We would like one representative from the HOA if they wanted to speak. It's not a public open meeting, but we would like to hear from you. But if we can have one person come for like 3 minutes, that would be great. And then we'll go through our discussions after. If you could state your name and address, please.
My name is Martin Cawley. I live at 3911 West Prospector Way. I serve as one of the sponsors of the petition for annexation on the HOA board for the Lambert Park Estates. First of all, we appreciate everything that the city staff has done in working with them. It's been a very good collaborative effort with the city staff. I think you've received some of my emails in the past. It was unfortunate that with the Planning Commission, and we understand their recommendation, but it was based upon erroneous information in terms of the financial analysis. At that time, we're aware, and we've had subsequent conversations that perhaps the recommendation would have swung the other way had they known that it was a positive revenue versus a deficit to the city. Of course, that's hearsay. I mean, we can't go back in time now and relitigate that. But in terms of the key issues here, there's a significant financial benefit to the city. That's been proven. We can prove that out using the same methodology as the city staff. These are high valued assessed properties, and they significantly contribute positively to the city. To help offset the cost, the geographic location of this property is such that, as Austin just mentioned, the cars are on your streets regardless. And so we use Alpine streets, we use Alpine parks, without any contribution financially. So that's one of the benefits to the city, is that it would help offset the maintenance, the routine maintenance and costs that the city generally incurs. The other issues that have constantly resurfaced, and I know were debated at the Planning Commission, was one of precedence. And that is an issue that is interesting, because the city's own case history has shown that there is no concept of precedence. In fact, when you look at Blue Bison, right, the city was victorious and successful in that case in proving that exceptions do not translate into precedence. In fact, I'm not aware of any situation where there's an island of Utah County sitting within Alpine City with the history that we have. So that doesn't prevent a developer from arguing precedence. They can argue whatever they want, but there's no legal standing for it. The other thing was liability. That came up in the Planning Commission. The liability, we don't see any liability. There's The infrastructure is already there. And that's a key point. This development exists. And when we're talking about the code and everything that's, the general plan of the city, it exists, it's there. So what are the avenues for remedy on that? Well, we're not going to go back and do acre lots. That would be impossible. So it exists, it sits in the middle of Alpine. So if it's an issue of aesthetics, that's not going to change, whether we're annexed or not. The other then is the precedence, which I just addressed. So there's no liability that we can see. The infrastructure is in place. The homes are being built. If there's any liability, it would have to be caused by the city, or it would be caused by contractors and homeowners who would foot that bill. And as Austin pointed out, it would have, once annexed, it would have the same normal liability as any other hillside community within Alpine. So there's no difference there. In terms of the other benefits here, I mentioned this before, that the sense of community, that's what really comes out from the residents of the area, is the sense of community. We understand we use the roads, we use the parks, and we don't have any financial contribution to the city, which we love. That's why one of the reasons we moved here. In terms of the park, we agree that we'll take that over, and we're not going to restrict it either. If we were annexed, we would maintain it, and in fact, maintain it to city standards, and it would be open for anyone's use. In fact, it is now. A lot of people come to the park and see the poppies and use the park. So in terms of these things, there's no cost to the city. Everything's in place. The only cost would be the snow plow service, which is already baked into the financial analysis. So it's already covered by the property tax revenue. In terms of the criteria, we feel we meet all the criteria I mentioned about the city code. The paved road through Lambert Park seems to continue to come up. That's a separate issue. We have no standing in that. That's a separate city issue. In fact, when they talked about the fees and assessing fees for us to join the city, all the projects that were mentioned have nothing to do with annexation. They're separate, distinct projects, whether the city wants to annex us or not. So it's not conditioned, it's not a direct incremental cost of annexation. It's something if the city wants to do, they'll go ahead and do it, whether we're annexed or not. Let's see, we talked about the financial, the liability, and then the concept of control. I think you saw Ed Bush's email, which was unsolicited by us, but we appreciated it. But he talked about the concept of control, of taking control of an island that sits within Alpine City. I'm gonna, after this topic, that's a perfect example of taking control. Otherwise, we would not be subject to that. But under city, we would be. So there's multiple benefits with no cost to the city, and we respectfully ask that you vote in favor of annexation. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
But thank you.
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
Maybe they follow along, maybe with the city, but first question on the park. Are they able to control the park, maintain the park, but also put no restrictions on city residents? Is that?
Yeah.
We have some private parks like this private, and they definitely put restrictions on residents and those. How would this be different?
I mean, it's essentially like telling your neighbor they can come and use your yard. It's their common area. They own it in common with all the 59 lot owners, as I understand it. And they can give permission to whoever they want to.
We have not restricted it in the past. We won't do it.
But could there be, say, a trail easement or a public access easement, connecting through there?
Yeah. They could grant that if they chose
if
to.
granted. Or maybe, and I don't even know if that's possible, but something like non-disruptive or non-obtrusive public usage or something. I don't know.
Just a couple of questions, if that's okay, Wade. Thank you. And I appreciate your emails. I've read them all. But next question, liability. I thought I heard somewhere that there is no liability for houses that have been built to date, but future, say we were to annex it, future homes, if there were a mudslide or a fire or something that happened that way, there would be a liability attached. So some homes would be, the city would be liable on some,
Yeah.
and is that true or?
That is true. The county is responsible for the homes that are already built now. Once it's annexed, and the city becomes responsible.
Because we obviously.
Which I understand is no different than any hillside community in Alpine, correct?
Except, well, no, you guys are sitting right at the base of a huge alluvial fan.
Which we have flood control of that.
So there is liability to the city, but not those that have already been built. The liability is passed to the county. Annex it, any homes that come and get a permit and are built after that. If they're with this alluvial fan or, whether it be a fire, mudslide, the city, in the same way we were kind of responsible in Box Elder a decade ago, had to step in. And is that correct, or I'm trying to understand that liability issue?
Well, I mean, Hiram can maybe speak to this, but I'll tell you what I know. We didn't end up being liable for anything in Box Elder. No one sued us. We didn't win, we didn't lose any case. It didn't cost us money. Sure, we had to go in and do some improvements. But I mean, we have the box shelter drainage that comes through there, and that's what we were working on, but we didn't have to pay for any new carpet or improvements on someone's home or, that type of liability. We did get sued further south where a ditch flooded over by one homeowner, and the city actually got out of that case. The terms slip in my mind, Hiram. Immunity, the Government Immunity Act got us out of that case.
But does it open us up for a different liability piece? Because I think Box Elder met our master plan. And so that might indemnify us or give us immunity because we built according to our plan. And that might be a Hiram question too. When you don't follow your master plan, does that change your liability responsibilities?
Yeah, I guess on the liability question, Councilmember Phelan, I just need a little bit more clarification. What type of liabilities are you afraid of or
So if it's
anticipating?
built in a certain area where, like up in Box Elder, we had huge rains and we had, fortunately, very fortunately, some of those runoffs went between houses, and we were fortunate in a lot of ways. If they would have hit a house, would we be liable? And I thought we would. If afterwards, I think we had to go put a big retaining basin in, water retention basin, shore up there's a lot of cost to the city on that. The concern is if there is a fire, there is rains, flood comes through there. Is there a different liability having it being built all out in the city, annexing it, or annexing it right now with half of the houses built and half of the houses not yet received? I heard somewhere that there was, and I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah, I'm not aware that there'd be any distinction between whether we'd be liable for houses built and
So Craig mentioned
maybe
that
Craig.
since we didn't issue those building permits, the county did. So any of the houses
Yeah, that-
that were built in the county would be responsible for those.
but that would be for a different issue. For example, if there was any sort of like defect in building, right? So I guess it would come into this if for example, the soil tests that the county requires are different than what the city requires, right? For drainage, then yeah, absolutely, that would go towards the county's liability. They issued the building permit, and any new homes coming into our cities would be subject to our soil requirements and our slope requirements and everything else, right? And so we would take on that liability in terms of if our soil requirements aren't up to snuff for 100-year flood or whatever it would be. Does that make sense on the building permit side? But if you're talking about, services that the city provides,
No,
you
no,
know,
No, I
and
don't think
something
he's
goes.
thinking about, I think it's like a natural disaster
Fire,
or something.
flood, those
Yeah.
type of things are the questions I would.
So do you have any more, does anybody have more questions for Mr. Colley?
I do.
Okay, keep going.
Sorry, go ahead. I want your thoughts on, I think you mentioned, but I didn't quite understand, you were talking about some of those fees that were attached, there's 4 or 5 items. And you said it's not a direct cost. What are you saying that, that you feel that your subdivision shouldn't pay for those?
Correct. I mean, they, as my understanding is, any fees assessed for that are tied to annexation should be tied to annexation, any incremental cost. For example, you say, well, if we annex you, it's gonna cost the city this to improve infrastructure or to do something, you know, to get you up to city standards. There's nothing like that. These are projects that are like the parking lot that was mentioned at the end of Box Elder Drive. Well, that has nothing to do with annexation. That's something that if the city wants to do, they can do it or
Well,
not.
it
do
kind of does. I mean, if you're not in the city, if people are parking in your streets, you can complain to the county. But once you become part of Alpine, you know, people will be parking up there to access certain, you know, whether it's Lambert or whatnot. We would need to facilitate that. And then one of that would be a parking lot.
But that doesn't exist today. I mean, if people want to come to the park, which they do now, and they come and they park, you know, on the
Yeah,
streets.
so we're just saying that this is what we foresee. And then, you know, these are projects that, you know, yes, they would be nice, but it would be, I feel like it'd be more impetus. Like right now, those are projects that we really kind of have on the back burner. They're not a priority for the city right now.
Right, I would say they're
But
not
they would-
required.
But they would be if you come into the city, because all of a sudden we're increasing the number of residents that are on the other side of Grove Drive, other side of that culvert. We would need to plan and have more throughput. But right now, we qualify with the secondary access with the county because you guys are county residents. There's little loopholes that maybe we don't have to address right now if we're gonna be honest about it.
Yeah, I would just say that, I mean, it exists. There's 59 laws that exist, the traffic, the number of people, those who visiting the park. I fail to see any
Right.
difference, you know, annexation or non-annexation in terms of those projects.
Right, and I think that, you know.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes, but, okay, more questions, or is that it?
Just
Thank-
real quick,
yeah.
I didn't quite understand what you were talking about with precedents, and then you threw the Blue Bison name in there. But trying to figure out what that
Correlated.
meant, like I didn't draw a connection at all to that.
My understanding, I don't have all the details on Blue Bison. I'm going through what I've learned from other people, is that the city had an issue with under Blue Bison, and there was a concept of precedence that was raised, and there was a successful court case by the city that ruled out precedence. In other words, the city, my understanding is that the city was successful on that there
No,
was no
No,
precedent.
I
it's a
think you've
totally
got it
separate
wrong.
legal-
And
I think you've got.
Council, just since we're in the middle of
Yeah.
pending
Yeah, we can't
litigation, I'd
say-
recommend that we don't talk
Sure.
currently about Blue Bison.
Yeah, I just didn't.
Any
I
other
just don't
questions for
understand.
Mr. Colley?
So final question is, if the property would have been originally developed in the city, base density would have been 28 lots. The lots stand at 59. I guess you could have gotten a bonus. I don't know how you get a bonus.
They could have gotten 35.
A
if
bonus
they-
is kind of cool.
So PRD is a planned residential development.
Yeah.
So if you're, that area in the city would be zoned for 1 acre lots. And so, yeah, you get 28 acres. But if you give, or if the developer donates 50% of that acreage as open space, which a lot of them do, because there's a lot of slope up there,
Mhm.
they would have gotten bonus density of up to 35 lots, which would have been an additional, what, 7 lots.
Okay, and it seems like the history of this thing is that discussion did take place between the city and the developer. And the developer opted not to build in compliance with that. So when I look at the example on here with the, what is it, 71 acres and how many lots? I can't find it now, I'm just looking at it. In the Cove. I think the Cove has less lots and double the acreage, but no, I can't.
Or are you talking
I'm
about
trying
Pine
to
Grove?
I'm trying to find it. I don't know where it is now. Oh, it's down here. There it is, 76 acres, 62 lots. They snuck an extra 3 in there.
Well, because one of them was open space and then you guys sold it as a lot before it came in. There's so. Yeah.
Gotcha, okay. So, I don't know, so I look at that and that's just hard to reconcile in my mind, the fairness of that, really, I mean.
But it exists.
Yeah, so.
We can't
so-
go back in history and
Okay,
none of us.
no,
were
I know,
involved.
but so I go and I build so my question is, if I were to do that today as a developer, city staff, and you said, and I was approved for 35 lots, but I built 59. I developed 59 lots, and what would be my penalty? Is there a penalty, a fee, something that I would have to pay if I didn't follow the ordinance and I built in, and all of a sudden you came up one day and there's 59 houses sitting there and there should have only been 35. What are you gonna do about it?
That wouldn't happen. That's
I
not
think
how it
the
works.
Okay, I know,
distinction is-
but it did happen. He's saying it did happen and there's nothing you can do about it.
But they built within zoning in the county. So
Right.
they met the rules of the entity.
But now we're
that
not
had
talking about the
jurisdiction.
county, we're talking about,
They want to come
City.
to the city.
Right.
So,
But this has probably happened before too. If you look at some of the parcels of land that came into the city through annexation, they probably don't meet our current zoning, like up Fort Canyon. There's lots that are less than 5 acres. You know, there's lots that are probably less than 1 acre and they're in a 5-acre zone because basically we inherited that through annexation. So.
okay,
okay. Any
So
more
there's no-
questions for
there's
Mr.
no
Do you
penalty.
have more questions for Mr. Fowler?
no, that's it.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Jane Griner, the Chair of Planning Commission, wants to say a few words. Jane, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm here.
We're having a hard time hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Am I clear? Can
Go
you hear
ahead.
me? Okay.
yes, that's much
Alright.
better.
Okay. I just was happy to answer any questions, but just wanted to reiterate the main reasons as we looked through things were that it doesn't meet the master plan, and not just by a little bit, but by a lot. And we felt like it did have more liability than other hillside neighborhoods. And the reason why is because the density is double or close to double what it would have been. So the potential for fires and the disruption of the area and things like that feel like they're greater. Even though we didn't have any suits from the last incident, I feel like doesn't mean we won't for future incidents, or if there is any type of death or loss and it happens and is related to a subdivision that is outside of our master plan by a long way. You know, that was kind of the liability concern that I had and that others, you know, that we discussed. And so if anyone has any other questions, but basically the master plan, the liability, and the precedent, not so much, maybe even the developer, but the county did knowingly approve this subdivision, knowing what Alpine City's master plan was. And that does concern me that the county approved a neighborhood or a development, knowing it did not meet the master plan of the adjacent city. And that says to me that the county is okay with having developments that they maintain. You know, otherwise I feel like they would have them go to the city. And so, you know, not necessarily so much the word precedent, but that statement of that the county is, you know, willing to be in developments and have neighborhoods that they maintain is also one of the considerations. So if anybody has any questions that we discussed, I'm happy to speak to them.
Anybody have questions for Jane?
Yeah, Jane, it sounds like there was some discussion about whether the city would benefit financially or not benefit financially, and that seems to be a big reason, or was just called out in this meeting as a big reason why you guys denied it.
Yeah,
And the numbers have been updated. Is that? the
that
feeling you
that
got?
was in consideration, but I don't think that was the main consideration, just because the financial benefit, you know, obviously it was more of a wash when we looked at it. And so unless the financial benefit really outweighed what we felt like were bigger issues, which were the master plan, the potential liability, the potential future of other annexations. And also we talked about the timing. Perhaps we should annex this property, but is the timing right? And as you mentioned before, we were given the information, and I believe it was clearly stated that the county is liable for anything built before annexation, and that the city is liable for anything built after annexation. And the majority, you know, we felt like there was still a lot of liability that would be assumed by annexing at this time.
Is there more houses that can be built up there?
Yeah,
Yeah. So can I just say something on liability, Mayor?
yes.
I think we're looking the wrong direction if we're looking to the planning commission on liability issues. Those questions really should go to our attorneys. And I mean, you know, and their question should too. I don't think we had our attorney at that meeting. So I just recommend for anything on liability that you look to our
Right,
attorneys.
but I think the information they got was in the first meeting, they set, remember, they had several meetings. In the first one, they had that question, and Austin, I'm assuming, took it back to Craig, and Craig told them this. And I remember Craig talking about it too, that it was anything built before and after that, because the issue of indemnification came up, from what I remember. But, you know, Austin can address that on what happened and how the planning commission got that information. I'm just
Yeah.
assuming that was the process.
Yeah, so there were discussions in the planning commission about liability, and they had concerns about what could go on up there, and they asked me to go and talk to Craig about some of the issues up there. So one of their questions was, could the city be indemnified if we annexed Box Elder South into the city? The answer, Craig's answer to that was no, you can't just be indemnified. So we would hold some liability if they were annexed, but the way that he stated it was this subdivision would be just like any other hillside subdivision that we have in the city. So if someone comes in, they have to get building permits. It would be exactly the same in Box Elder South. Any future home would have to come in and get a building permit. It'd have to be built according to our standards. We would have a level of liability there, but no different than any other subdivision that's within city limits.
But the question was, could the residents of Box Elder South indemnify the city? Just to be clear, I remember that discussion, but I mean, as far as liability and things like that go, in my experience, you know, if the city requires or the county requires a study to look at hazards in the area, and then this county says, oh, this hazard hasn't been addressed, but we're gonna allow you to go ahead and build this subdivision. I can see a potential liability issue there. But if that hazard has been mitigated, then I think you've done what you can do, and Hiram can speak to that, but that's where I see some differentiation, and that's where I say, I think those questions really should go to the attorneys directly.
Okay.
So, maybe you remember, Shane, in 2015, the city attorney wrote a letter on this topic when it was discussed at the time, that the city's liability would be very low. But I'm wondering if something changed there. Is it because homes went in since then? I mean, is there any difference there, or was that based on governmental immunity?
My recollection is it was based, and that would have been before Craig and Hiram were on board, but But that's always been my understanding of things.
Yeah, there's always going to be governmental or immunity here. I think in terms of liability, and granted, I haven't dug into this issue specifically, but just from what I understand, the liability issue and the distinction there is, for example, if some catastrophe comes down that can be attributed to, failure by the county to have some sort of mitigating code, then of course the homes that were built under the county code, a residential owner could bring suit against the county to say you didn't take the proper steps to ensure that this was built correctly. When we bring the homes into the city, they're going to be subject to our ordinances, at least the ones that haven't been built yet, right? They're going to have to go through ours. And then, so if something goes wrong and a homeowner wants to sue the city, they can point to the city and say, you didn't have sufficient requirements for whatever it might be, soil. In terms of just a fire or anything else coming down, there's going to obviously be governmental immunity that will protect us, and caps that have been set by the legislature on a liability the municipality can face anyways. But I'm happy to look into it further.
One more question on that. So
Yeah.
Obviously, we had the box elder, we had water came down there right there, and then afterwards, we put in the big detention basin up there, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Well, it was there before,
But
just needed
we
to be
spent a lot of money.
approved.
Well,
Make it
there
bigger.
actually wasn't one there in that case,
Above.
not in Box Elder.
So the question I would have would be, it would have been nice for us to know that ahead of time. Box Elder could have put that in on their dime because it was that should have been part of their development. In this case, we're also at a location there. Has the city done a deep dive into see if we can do the same type of mitigating things on that subdivision that were needed to happen on the Box Elder subdivision?
Well, that was part of the point, I guess, is the county did go through that process. And they required the ditch and berm on the east side of the subdivision so that if flood waters did come down there, that they would be directed away from the homes.
And is that the best that we could ask for up there is my question, or is that just something they passed? Meaning,
Can I interject right here? Because I have looked through these reports and Shane's right. They say that based on the design, because no one's actually evaluated after it's been built, they say it should work. These are the minimum requirements. However, everything has a caveat. And the caveat is due to the erratic and largely unpredictable nature of debris flow runout paths. Once the material reaches an alluvial fan, the entire area of the site has the potential to be impacted by the future debris flow. You need more information. So they say such studies are beyond the scope of this assessment.
It started at 5 feet, right? And then they increased it to 7, is that?
It started at 2.5. And again, this was the design, not actual models of what was built, our new weather patterns, our unpredictable weather patterns, the density. And then I think everyone in front of them has a packet, it's the active alluvial fan landform inventory. And that's the most current information we have from 2017. So I tried to see if we had any other reporting or documentation after that, and it puts this area in the high risk zone. So, we can go back to, we're a city and we get indemnified, but there's also something called discretionary immunity. In the case of natural disasters, if governments are aware, which we have a report from the Utah Division of Emergency Management of high-risk natural disaster areas, there is a possibility of us having, being liable for that.
Typically what happens with something like this, whether you take Three Falls or Heritage Hills or North Point or any of these subdivisions, we have maps to show that there are these potential hazards there. They're very high level. not in detail. You know, USGS contours are like 40-foot contour intervals. Not 2-foot contour intervals. So they're identified at a high level, and then our ordinance requires the developer to go do a detailed study. And I think this document refers to that, of that hazard, to see if it's really there, number one. For example, like with a fault, there's faults shown on maps in 3 falls that they did trenching and the faults weren't there. And so if the faults were found there, then they would require certain setbacks off of those faults to mitigate that hazard. And so that's typically what a study like this is used for, is to say there is a potential here, go study it in more detail, more the finite level for that particular site. And then is there something that could be done to mitigate that hazard? And that's what.
Well, and our master plan was the mitigation was lower density.
I
Well,
don't know if the lower
lower-
density really mitigated.
Okay, maybe.
I don't, yeah, I
mean,
don't
a
think
flood's
that-
gonna flood a high
yeah.
density or a low density.
Okay.
So
So
But you're flooding 2 homes instead of 1, I think. is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
could be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Shane, are our city standards different from the county
Yes.
than on, say, the hillside alluvial impacts and so on?
Well, so our hazards are actually based off of maps from the county. Back in, I want to say it's the 80s or 90s, the county actually had a geologist on staff that created these maps, and that's what we use today, tied to identify these. We have debris flow hazards, rockfall hazards, I think landslides and faults, and then the floodplains. FEMA does the floodplain maps, but so our study is based off of those. If any of those fall within that property, then they have to do a study as part of the development process to determine first if they can mitigate that hazard and safely build there. And then it kind of goes through the process that way. And I think that's a similar process to what the county has on that as well. I believe that's why that ditch and berm are on the east side of that development.
I mean, it
Yeah.
seems like it's pretty high. Do you know how high it is?
Well,
From when I'm looking at
they-
it now.
My recollection, and we were in a court case that these studies came out. My recollection is the first study said, this is the size improvements you need. But then there were some questions, they got a second opinion, and they said, you know, rather than argue this, we're gonna beef this up and have more capacity, have a deeper ditch, higher dike. So that there's not a question if it would work for the design storm.
And that was to county standards, or are you saying that would exceed city as well?
I think we would have
Just
had them
overall.
go through a very similar process as what they had to go through in the county.
So it started like at 5 or something, 2.5 above berm and then 2.5 foot ditch or something, right? And then they added, was it like a couple more feet?
Yeah, something like that.
Now, the question is, if there is a catastrophe and it flows in there, would the city still have liability even with this extra big ditch? Right, with, you know, it's a natural catastrophe or something beyond our.
Yeah, so in all tort claims, because what would naturally come from that is somebody would be asserting negligence on the city, right? In negligence and failing to, mitigate whatever future natural occurrence is going to happen. If it's in that analysis, it's always going to come down to foreseeability and whether the city is put on notice of that. And so if it's not foreseeable that there's going to be some catastrophe that comes, and if the city took reasonable steps, which is going to be determined by a fact finder on whether the city took reasonable steps to mitigate against anything, it is highly factual, but that's why cities continue to do these studies, because they'll do a study and they'll put forth a mitigation effort. And generally speaking, a fact finder is going to say, look, the city did all it could. we can't predict that there's gonna be, a flood of 400 years that comes down and ruins it. They did all that they could. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it is gonna turn on foreseeability and notice. that the city
So
has
did
to
the
get this
city,
problem.
did the city do these studies then? If the onus is on the city to perform the due diligence, are these studies that we're referring to sponsored by the city?
No, they were done as part of the development process, just like would be done here, just like we've required of other developments in the city.
Okay, I had a quick question for Jane. She mentioned something about your discussion. Did Jane say this regarding like maybe controlling development or controlling building standards? Was that a discussion of planning commission?
We did discuss that, if it was annexed in, they would build to Alpine City's standards. We didn't feel like that was that much of an advantage. The county has building standards as well that they need to build to. And so, that was potentially a plus, but not significant. I mean, that didn't.
Okay, because as a municipality, we don't want to control, we just want to regulate. And what I want to
Exactly.
understand from Hiram is there's an active HOA there. So does the city now supersede the CCNRs in that neighborhood?
No,
Because I'm not sure that regulation would be handed over to us because they have a recorded CCNRs.
no, the CCNRs would stay in place. The HOA would still govern that. They would be subject to city ordinances as they're coming in, but typically, with an HOA and CCRs, they're above and beyond what a city or a county is going to require. And so those would all stay intact.
So Hiram, the HOA could have stricter standards than the city, but not looser.
Correct. And if it had looser, the city would still be able to enforce its ordinances.
But I guess on that point, there's a couple things that we've seen up there, right? There's a accessory building shed that was bigger, taller, wider, whatever, closer to the line. I don't know if there's retaining walls that would be different, but I think there was an issue last month or something where they had dirt too close to the line or something. So there could, I guess there could be some of these situations where we may have tighter standards than the county. I don't know if it's building height, but apparently we've seen a handful.
Obviously.
So
Sorry, Jessica.
sorry, how do we straddle that when the building envelopes are outside of what our current building envelopes require? Everything's
They
an
would become,
exception.
yeah, they would become non-conforming lots.
Well, you can have a building envelope, even in our city. I could show you plats where it shows, within 10 feet of each side of the lot, so 10 feet of the property line. That doesn't say that they don't have to meet the setbacks for that zone. It's just a building envelope. You can build within that envelope, but you still have to meet setbacks. Because we don't know, with our ordinance, it's typical to have a combined 30-foot side setback, minimum of 12 on a side. We don't know if they're gonna have 12 on the north side or 12 on the south side. And so it's typical for those envelopes to be, as I described before.
So the non-compliance part is just their frontage then. Their setbacks are still the same.
If they were in the city or if they're in the county, whatever jurisdiction, they should be required to meet the setbacks for that zone and that development. As far as frontages go, yeah, you would in my mind, if you were to annex, you'd be inheriting that just like you inherited smaller lots than what our current zoning is in Fort Canyon.
And so do we know what the county setbacks are? Is it looser, the same as the city?
She said she.
I know them. We're building right now, it's 30 from the street and 15 off the side, it's 15.
Yeah, so similar to ours.
Can I ask on this section G here in the annexation policy, it says annexation fee shall be paid according to Alpine City Consolidated Fee Schedule adopted by the Alpine City Council. What fees are those referring to?
So that's where over time, the fee has varied. Sometimes it's been 2,500 an acre, sometimes it's been 2,500 a lot. Sometimes it's been, we need certain offsite improvement. The city feels that certain offsite improvements need to be done for them to be willing to annex that property. So it's a variable.
Who sets it?
You do.
City council does? Okay.
Yeah, usually you would ask for recommendation from the staff, you know, what you feel it should be. And, you know, we give you a recommendation, you take it or not. So.
Lon, do you have any
Yeah.
questions or comments?
Well, I have some things I've been thinking about for several weeks now as I listen to the planning commission thing. Can I spend a minute to go over some of my thoughts? And so during, excuse me, during the planning commission discussion on this annexation, it was said many times that the developer did what they called an end run. That term is often used figuratively to describe a secret or dishonest attempt to avoid a rule or a problem. I respectfully don't see it that way. It's important to actually know some of the facts of the past as we make this decision. Someone's claimed that years ago the developers made this end run in regards to getting what they wanted is not the way I see it. In the past, the developer actually came to the city with a proposal for a development that consisted of a 26 lot subdivision. As they began that process, the city told the developer, no, we wanted a park. We wanted that area, if we're going to annex that area in, we want it to come in as a park. The developer said that you can have it as a park if you buy it. So there was an appraisal done. The price tag was more than the city wanted to pay. And so the city told the developer to go through their process with the county then, because city did not want it to come in that way. Also what I heard in the planning commission was that there was a zone change. That is not accurate. There was no zone change to Box Elder South. It has always been a TR5. Possible confusion that may have gone on is there was a zone change in the Pine Grove property, similar timing somewhere in that time frame, but not the Box Elder South area. There was no zone change. So it has always been that zone, TR5.
And just for clarification, TR5 is
A lot of different things in the county.
Yeah, a lot of different things in the county,
It's kind of a
correct.
catch-all.
Could go down to the half acre if certain things are provided. So, so as far as an end run, it's the developer just did what he was told to do and he went and did it.
But Lon, he did it according to the county standards and not to Alpine standards.
Well, it was also done against the council of county staff. They didn't want that to happen. It was the county commissioners who overruled what the staff had recommended.
I would beg to differ a little on that, because I went to those
I know, but
public hearings.
we
and
just
that.
met with them. He said that was because of the county commissioners. Is that,
So I think that comment was related to the rezones of the Melby and Pine Grove properties. County staff recommended, and I think even planning commission recommended against the rezone. But the county commission did rezone it. But even though it was TR5, they put a limitation of minimum 1
so
acre
are you
lot.
saying, so they didn't do that with the box elder?
Mhm.
Oh, I thought they said, because, you know, so obviously the county staff, they don't want to manage,
They don't want to manage people.
they don't want to manage people, they don't want to manage developments. So
Correct.
I
So
think
the-
what they need to
so
do
their-
is encourage
Their
people.
recommendation back then was go to the city, work with the city, see if you can make it work to annex into the city so that the city can provide all that they need to provide. And the city at that point in time was not willing to do that. And so as I reflected back here not long ago, I listened to a Highland City Council meeting about this. And they had a public hearing concerning the road, the widening of the road. And I was affected by that meeting as I listened to it. I wasn't even in the meeting, but it really hit me hard, because some of the citizens, Alpine citizens, got up and commented that they wished that Highland would annex Alpine in to their city, because they felt like Highland would take care of their citizens better than Alpine would. And so I've thought over that since that time, and realized that and as I reflect back on my studies as a councilman, reading the book, the Utah League of Cities and Towns, why are we a city? Why do cities and towns exist? Well, the first and foremost purpose of local government is to provide services. So people long ago learned that some useful and necessary services are more efficiently provided by the group rather than the individual effort. Second, developing and preserving a sense of community is an often overlooked role of local government. People like belonging. And third, the main reason to incorporate is the desire to have local control. While this is certainly important, it is the most overemphasized. So as I have thought about that, and my purpose on the council over the course of years, is one of our critical points is to provide a sense of community. And we've done the first and hardest thing. We're providing the services, that we're providing the water and the sewer, and our police force and fire department go up there, and so on and so forth. But the second, we live in a town that realistically are the most wonderful, loving, giving people, and in my opinion, all the things that we've been talking about are critical. The liability and the well, we spent a lot of time on liability, so that's first and foremost in my mind. But these other things that we talk about in financial and taxes and things like that, it seems like that's all done. It's figured out. It's not a big deal. There's not, the taxes will cover everything. There's no financial obligations. They're using the streets already. They're using the homes that are there are already built. And it's going to exist whether we do it or not. And I think the most important part in this is in this little sliver of our community that's surrounded by our community is to just get them annexed in and move forward with it.
So Lon, if I understand you correctly, you're saying they're already receiving all the services. They already come and use Alpine and are part of the community. But based on emotion, we should annex them in. That's what I'm hearing from you. Is that right?
Well, you can hear it that way if you'd like.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Uh-huh.
Because that's what you said, you know, everything else aside, you know, we should just do it. So what are you saying?
Well,
should just do?
we should just do it because the other things are done and over with. We're gonna get the revenues from the tax.
Right.
They're gonna share the burden that way. And when we come to talk about the fees, the assessed fees on either a parking lot or the road straightening over the box, over the Dry Creek, we're doing that anyway, whether they're gonna be annexed in or not.
Right, and they're gonna benefit from that too.
And they will benefit. The whole city benefits. Actually, the whole county benefits from that.
Totally.
And so as far as making those stipulations, if we're wanting to try and be fair about that, I'm confused as to why we would have a value that is only divided between Box Elder and Box Elder South on that one, and not just divided over the whole community, because the funds that we're going to be using are the funds from 800 South, from the people who live down there, that live over on Pfeiffer Horn, live over on Lakeview. Those funds are just funds that we have been accumulating over the course of time that will be used to make and do that project, or any project that we do. And so if we're going to be fair about that one, let's just divide it equally across every resident in the community. And then if that fee is assessed, it would be a fair fee that it's divided equally amongst those homes up there as well then.
Okay.
If that's how you.
So you're not basing this totally on just feel good. You're saying there's a fee reason to do this, to share those fees.
Well, the taxes for sure.
Okay, so the property tax.
Property taxes are things that help in sharing the burden of this community.
So my one, I've seen for when we annex the Cove, that I do feel like we should have levied a fee. There's issues up there that we've seen that we're dealing with right now, and even more so, that's why I feel like we do need to be more comprehensive in the way that we approach this, because it does become a burden, right? And I know that, Mr. Colley didn't agree with these projects, but it's really projects that we would not do unless.
Well, you wouldn't do it because I wanted to put a parking lot up there at the end of that street, and you guys didn't want to do that on the end of Moyle Drive.
It doesn't.
So yeah,
It's
we
because
aren't
it's a
going to do
financial.
it because we probably still won't do it.
It's a financial burden, but no, I mean, if it were, that's what I'm saying. These are costs that we would see. You look at what happened with the Cove. We didn't, we didn't even follow, I feel like, our even city staff and what should be done. And, now we're dealing with aftermath, and we're having to invest so much money in.
Tell me the money we're investing in that.
In the
In
Cove?
the Cove.
Well, right now, it looks like we're gonna have to pay for a connection for water, because
We had that that was $50,000 that we.
it's a lot more than that.
Oh, I know now.
But that's all we have.
For sure.
And then, we've got monies, as far as the streets, they have no sidewalks. There's no school bus that's gonna go up there, so we have to provide a safe route for these kids coming down. And so, yeah, we're gonna have to put in a multi-use trail to allow safe routes so that people aren't walking along the street, especially the kids. There's things like that. I know there's, they're wanting to rip out streets to make it easier, or trees to make it easier to do the snow plowing. There's things like that that I felt like weren't very well planned out. I totally get what you mean. Sense of
Yeah.
community, I totally get it. But let's be, let's make sure that we're doing this right. Let's
Okay.
think about all the possibilities and see what we need to
And-
do. I'm
and
not
I-
saying no,
And I
but
agree.
let's think it through.
So what I'm referring to as well then is the streets. We won't have to do anything with the streets. We don't have to do anything with the water. We don't have to do anything with the sewer. The impacts of all those have already been taken care of. Because when they did develop it, they did the curb and gutter and sidewalk as per at least city standards.
Yeah, and the streets are even wider.
So when we talk about some of those expenses, what I'm referring to is there seems to be no expense that we would have to come up with to bring them into the city.
Except to service some of those.
Well,
projects.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, there's twice as many homes, so there's twice as many cars. And so I don't know. you
They're
know,
not, they're there anyway.
Well,
What do you
okay,
mean?
that's the point. So if I come to your house and I park a big broken down dump truck on your front yard and I leave it there, and you come to me and say, Kelly, get that thing off my yard, it's there. I'm not saying there are places that dump truck. I'm just saying,
I don't
obviously-
even understand that analogy at all.
well, that's your argument is it's there. So because it didn't comply with the city standards, you're saying it's okay to not comply with the city standards if you do it and you come back later
You're
and say
referring
it's
to
there.
traffic. You're referring to cars. You
No,
just
I'm not.
said cars.
I'm saying that's part of the, right? We're gonna have to redo those roads and stuff. We've got a lot of complaints about all the cars coming down there. And a lot of people pushing for a lot of things up there having to do with traffic. So there is the traffic. So there's additional cars we have to take into account. That's a cost, right? Which you already mentioned. There's costs that we should look at. And
That's a
there's
cost for
taxes
who,
we should
when.
take in. You said there's taxes we should take in to cover the
Correct.
costs. So
Correct.
you're, in your mind, I'm gathering that you're thinking there's going to be costs. I don't know what those are that you're thinking, but you're saying that there has to be.
There are no.
Let's take
the costs that we'll be covering with those revenues is what we're currently paying to maintain the streets. Not theirs. We'll get B&C road funds in that when that comes in to help maintain those. But the streets that they use in our city, then we will, and the projects that we do within our city, they will be able to help share the burden of those projects.
So any project, yeah, okay.
The
gotcha.
project down on,
Gotcha.
that we're doing in Healy.
Yeah,
Park.
if they're
In Healy
contributing
Park,
more
we got
taxes, then obviously any
new
project.
playground over in Healy Park.
Gotcha.
They will be
And
providing.
And I'm sorry to you all. I don't want you to feel like second-class citizens. We're this is like, I hope you're part of our community. I hope you're part of our community anyway. And I don't, like Lon said, we need to do this in order for you to feel like you're part of the community. I hope that's not the case. I hope you still feel like you're part of the community. This is a discussion about, well, why is that?
Because you don't want us.
This has got nothing to do with you personally, right? This is not a personal thing.
Mayor, can I redirect the conversation really
Yeah,
quick?
go
Because
ahead.
there was a comment made that Lon said, it's no big deal, it's already there.
Yeah.
And where I go to is, it's the biggest deal because it's why I ran for city council. We have code and ordinances that give us guidance and law on the planning and regulating of our community. And so as I went through our instructions to make a decision regarding annexation, it was very clear. We had 7 bullet points. It was open to other things too, but if I just narrow down onto the guidance of the 7 bullet points, and I'm looking at our codes, our policies, if you go to the annexation policy, or the annexation. I'm not sure what plan that is.
It's the annexation policy and plan. It's 5.03 city council review and action.
Okay, so in that, again, that's an adopted policy that city council has agreed to. And under the policy agreements, or actually the policy guidance, I'm trying to find it in the packet. Can you just scroll down to just the policy? I think there's 4 or 5.
It's in there, Austin. It's highlighted. It's 5.03. There's 7 points. And this is what I'm trying to get to.
Oh, it's the policy statement. And this goes to what Council Member Law was saying. This isn't personal. This is about, as a city council, we've been elected to apply our city codes and ordinances. And so in doing that, we have these documents to give us the law and actually the guidance on how to move forward. And when I looked at the 7 bullet points given from staff, number 4 was whether or not the proposed annexation is consistent with the city's general plans. Austin told us it's okay if this is just guidance. It's not necessarily a yes or no. So then when I look further into our policies clearly state that development in annexed areas are to conform with master plans. If we weren't governed by these things, we wouldn't have organization, we wouldn't have a way to enforce ordinances. So we have to really go back to, as a council, we're elected to follow our codes and ordinances. And if we don't like them, then we need to get feedback from community members that elected us and change those to be reflective of what our citizens in our community want.
Hey, Jessica, I hear you, and those are good points, but so just a question to you is, but do we get more control in enforcing our plans and codes, going forward by annexing, so that they're enforced going forward? Or do we, is it basically they should never come in, as a punishment because the developer?
Well, it's not a punishment.
Oh, let me answer that
It's
question.
not
I don't like that language at all, because I feel like what again, as a council we're doing, we're not here to control anybody. We're here to regulate. They already have an HOA that regulates. They say they want to be good members of our community. They can do that whether they're an Alpine resident or not. Every email I read said we really want to contribute. Them contributing has nothing to do with us as being able to, it sounds like we can't supersede their HOA. They need to, as an HOA, come together and say, hey, what does the city want us to do? How can we align? And then secondly, it really is the county. It sounds like Lon has a lot of information on the history, and it made me think of a couple of questions. When they came to the city and asked for a certain number and the city said no, so then they went to the county. I'm unclear why the county didn't collaborate with the city of Alpine if at some point the county says we're not in the business of land management. Because clearly they're in the business of land management when they don't partner and collaborate with communities that in the long run they're hoping will take over those responsibilities.
On the HOA though, I think the city would supersede the HOA if they're in conflict.
But again, being in conflict has nothing to do with being in the Alpine. They say they want to be a good neighbors.
Okay.
Like my neighbors, when I do something that infringes on them, and even when it's not against our code, I try to be a good neighbor. So I think that's mixing topics.
One thing with the county, they're no different than the city. If a property owner comes in and says, I want to develop my land, if they present a plan that meets the ordinance, the county has to approve it, just like the city does.
Yeah.
So the city could encourage them, hey, you really should go talk to the city, which they did. And they did this on Alpine Cove. I remember Commissioner Lee being here either for the Cove or for this one or Zolman, he was too, yeah. And so they tried, but in the end, they can't really say no unless it doesn't.
No, they can't say no, but the petitioner has the, I'm assuming the petitioner in this situation understood Alpine City's master plan. So again, as a sitting council member that's been elected to adhere to my city codes and ordinances, my policies are saying to me, this is when you annex, this is what that looks like. And I don't see in any of these reasons that it meets what my city code and ordinances have spelled out is a reason to annex.
So real quick, what she's talking about is number 4 there in your 5.03. And then if you go down to the policy statement, which says development in annexed areas to conform to master plan, all annexations accepted by Alpine City shall be found in conformance with the Alpine City land use plan. That's in the policy right now. So I'm just saying, is that, so for clarification purposes, like, is that, that's what the policy says. That's what I was trying to pull out a lump, like, give me the reason according to our policy plan, not just you should do it because it's there. Like, according to the 7 things and the policy statement, give me the reason to do it, or that we should do it, or that the Alpine code says we can do it.
So one of those things within our plan also says that the plan is created by the city to guide decision-making regarding future annexations and helps the city plan for future expansion in conjunction with neighboring political entities. There's some caveats in that as well. It says, even though, of course, the proposed properties may lie within the expansion area, there is no guarantee that the annexation request will be approved by the city, right? So we went over that.
Yeah.
A couple of other things that I need to find is that, let me turn this. Trying to find the other one that says that it's not to conform. Sorry, I'm reading through here.
And your comment about aligning with surrounding political entities. I mean, this is aligning with surrounding political entities saying, hey, if you want to be part of Alpine, we've got a master plan. If you're interested in being in the city, let's collaborate and work together on that. So I think it does definitely send and meet that criteria you just met and sends a really clear message. You know, as long as I've lived here, it hasn't been a mixed message of what the residents of Alpine want Alpine to be.
Yeah, and I think this one part of the statement that says, would this be considered an island or peninsula?
Yes, it is.
Alpine City encourages islands and peninsulas of unincorporated territory located within the incorporated city of Alpine to become annexed.
But again,
That's
the
why it's in the
language
plan.
legally,
Yeah.
the
That's why
language
that's in the
legally,
plan that says you may annex it. Okay.
yeah, the legal word is encouraged.
Yeah.
If we were legally bound, it would say are required.
Right.
So we don't have a legal onus under the language of encourage.
Yeah, but we can use some common sense in some of these other things and be a little bit different in our decision making when it comes to things that haven't been in our control in the past, but that we can somehow consider forgiveness or leniency or exceptions. And that's where I'm going with this.
So
Okay.
should we first change this plan then? Should the city council change the?
I don't think you
annexation
need
policy?
to, because we have other areas that aren't in this same situation. They are situations that we should follow that plan then, if it's that concerning to you, Jessica, that we follow that plan in these other areas of annexation and move forward. I tell you, I've been in this.
So Lon, it's not me personally. I represent the Alpine residents. So this isn't my importance. It's what the master plan of our community has put forth.
You guys, we've been discussing this for over an hour.
That's true.
And I feel like we're going in circles.
Yes.
Unless somebody has something new or pertinent to say or have a question for staff, I would entertain a motion either way.
I do, Mayor. I have a couple points.
Okay.
So one, and I think both Mayor and Councilman Law made a good point. One, all things considered, there needs to be a compelling reason. And I think of the fiscal aspects is potentially one, but I want to clarify the numbers. So there's like this accounting workup, of what it is, but I think from a financial viewpoint, what the city would pay, we figure to be for plowing the roads, maintaining the roads. That's basically incremental, right? And that's estimated to be about 9K per year. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And anticipated revenues are like 130 or so.
It's 120.
120. Okay. So net to 110. And one interesting point on that is, we have the sales tax increase coming up on the ballot, which I think is less than that. So that's one thing is, this is easy revenue that really has, essentially no impact otherwise, potentially. And some advantages, we get another mountain access, we get 10 acres of open space, or however it is, 8. And the ability to potentially control lighting and so on. If you look, you may have seen this, there's this one house in Draper on the Hill and has this flashing big pink heart. And I can, if it happened in Alpine, would probably stop that. But, up there, we don't really control that. If someone got in the mood and said, I want to have a huge flashing pink heart. So anyway, I think that is a case, right, of some benefits to the city. But I think there is that key topic on precedent. Oh, and I think to the mayor's point, I think that parking lot as a annexation fee would make some sense because that is adjacent to it. If they're in the city, that would make sense. We're going to want a lot there. Maybe anyway, but particularly if they're in the city, that would make sense in addition to maybe some other projects. And then lastly, on the precedent topic, I'm not sure because I don't know the history for sure. I think it looked like the city had agreed at some point in the 80s or something to provide water to this area or utilities.
In the 90s, yeah.
90s.
92.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or that was the settlement, right?
Yes.
But so that situation wouldn't apply to any of these other annexation areas?
Correct.
Because they don't, okay. So, in other respects, there could be a precedent, but that one aspect is a key one where the city is already providing utilities here based on that agreement or settlement in the 90s, where that wouldn't apply to these other couple spots, I think.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, okay.
One other thing I just noticed that's interesting, and I understand the council's changing everything, but the Box Elder South plat was recorded in January of 2016. Our annexation plan is from 2017. And so when that was put in the plan to potentially be annexed, it was known that there were 59 lots there.
But I mean, the
Because-
annexation plan, though, that was something that was required by the state, correct? That anything within, how many miles within the city?
No, we didn't have, it's the Pine Grove property at one time was taken out of our plan. And then it was later put back in. It was in and then it was taken out and then it got put back
Oh,
in. So we don't
so-
have to.
So my understanding was that anything within a certain radius within the city, we need to include that in our annexation plan. Austin,
Hiram, do you know?
are we, in our annexation plan, weren't we required by the state to incorporate any parcels that were within a certain mile radius? Was it a half-mile radius from the city to include them in our annexation plan?
I've never heard, I'm not saying that it's not there, but I've never heard that.
That's what is that not true, Hiram?
I'm not positive. I can look at the statute real quick and tell you. I don't think I've ever heard that you have set requirements of how many miles out you need to go in your annexation plan. Like it with it in a certain radius.
Yeah,
I
that's,
think
But let me,
it
I'll
was
look right now.
Connecting.
was it connecting?
cities
Yeah,
or
that we
connecting
are required by state to include those,
entities.
and I think that's why they were in there, and that's probably, when they take it out, they probably did it erroneously. I don't think they were supposed to. So, and it's
We
just
can
good
check on that.
planning, right? So,
Mhm.
okay, so, and then did you have anything else, Greg?
No, I just think I mean, should we study the annexation fees? Would that be relevant to our decision?
Yes.
I mean, it is to me, so I just, I don't know if I
So
was the only one.
did you want to table this and then study the fees more, or do you want to hammer it out tonight?
I
It is
think
8:35.
my
and we
opinion
still
is
need
we're
to go
short
to
on
closed
time.
session.
And it could take some analysis, but that's because it's relevant to me. I think if approved, I think that's an important component.
I do too.
I think it's necessary, but.
So do you have a motion or?
Yeah.
Well, I have faith in the council that we would make a good decision on this. And if you feel like we need to address the fee portion of that in a deliberate and effective manner at another time, then I would make a motion that we table this to do so.
So is that your motion? I'm not
Yes.
sure.
That we table
Table,
this
okay.
to address the possibility of an annexation fee. Otherwise, I am ready to make a motion.
Is there a second
on-
to table the annexation?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, since it is a motion to table, there's no discussion. It'll go straight to a roll
Oh.
call vote.
Uh,
No
So
discussion.
I can't
just
ask
discussion.
any questions?
No, you
Okay.
cannot. Sorry, that's part of Robert's Rule of Orders, as you pointed out. So go
table.
ahead. Yes. Lon,
Yeah.
roll call vote.
So yes,
Isn't Jessica next?
She's
Oh.
always, whoever's online is usually always last.
Yeah.
Kelly Law, no.
Greg Gordon, yes.
Jason Thielen, yes.
Jessica?
Jessica Smua, no.
Okay, so the motion passes 3-2. It'll be tabled to discuss annexation fees.
And,
Can we add any more to the discussion? That's what I wanted to know. I mean,
No.
are we only,
We're done.
so, no, so we can't evaluate adding a condition or anything?
You can make a supplement. No, actually, once it's in table, it's done. Sorry.
I guess what
Yeah,
she's
we're
saying is,
done, but
our
we need to.
our discussion next time is not just limited just to the fee schedule,
correct.
just
No.
because that's the only thing. you
No, that's
said.
a component that Greg
Yeah.
wanted to see.
Yeah.
So then, hopefully it'll go further. So that's been tabled. Let's go on to item B, which is lighting ordinance, outdoor lighting ordinance.
You got this, Austin?
Let me just pull it up here on the screen. Okay, so this is our outdoor lighting ordinance. We briefly discussed this at the previous meeting. The council had some concerns with the ordinance that had been drafted and recommended by the planning commission. So I've taken that since then and made some amendments to the proposed ordinance based on the feedback that I received from the city council at the previous meeting. This ordinance is really looking at what we would call light trespass and how lights may impact a neighbor. And so one of the first things that I did here was to create some definitions to provide a definition for certain terms that we're using, and second, to kind of take some of the more complicated language out of the ordinance itself and just put it in the definitions so that we're not trying to define things in the ordinance itself. And so we'll just go through these definitions that are here. So there's outdoor lighting, which would be defined as external lighting on a building or property and any other artificial illumination of a property. Then we have a definition of outdoor recreation areas. Areas of property used for recreation purposes, including but not limited to soccer fields, sports courts, swimming pools, tennis courts, pickleball courts, basketball courts, sports fields, arenas, and any other areas of recreation. And then let's see if I continue down here. There's one more other definition, or maybe it's up past it. Light trespass, light from an artificial source, which can be measured on a neighboring property and subject to the foregoing. The maximum allowed vertical luminance at any point on the plane of the property line is 0.1 foot candles. And so those are the definitions that we've added. And then if we go back up.
And the foot candles, that's one that you can actually measure with something, right? There are devices that you can actually measure that.
That's correct. Yeah, you can buy little handheld devices and you can actually measure that unit.
Okay.
It just basically detects how much light is coming in. And so the planning commission did make a recommendation to use lumens, but there's really no good way to measure lumens, especially with like a handheld device or anything like that. And so those are the definitions. If we go into the ordinance now, so this is in every section of the residential code. We have a section at the very end of each of the development code for each zone called special provisions. And so outdoor lighting would be one of those special provisions. And this is what the language that we'd be proposing there. Outdoor recreation areas. All lighting shall be shielded and directed to illuminate only the areas in use. Light trespass onto adjacent property or public right-of-way is prohibited. Lighting is permitted from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. or 30 minutes after use of the outdoor recreation area ceases, whichever is earlier. And so this would apply to all of those areas that we just looked at in the definition. Any recreation area.
So back up there just a quick second, because you say lighting is permitted from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. or 30 minutes after use of the outdoor recreation area ceases. So if it ceases at 10:30, I mean, the lights have to go out.
The idea
by
is
11
if I'm not
because it's 30
playing,
minutes, but if it ceases at 11, it has to go out at 11.
Right,
Is
because
that-
it's
yeah,
whichever
how
is
you're-
earlier.
right.
Okay,
Right.
I just need to make sure that
We've just had issues where people would be playing, let's say
Right.
they're playing pickleball court and they leave their lights on all night long. So we just want to avoid, that's what this is trying to avoid.
Okay.
Hey, Austin, what about like the motion sensors? Like some people have on their garage or on the back of their house, like a motion sensor, and that'll be a bright light that goes on, but
But
it
it goes off.
goes off. So like that wouldn't be considered.
So that's not, that, the motion sensors, that would not be considered an outdoor recreation
Okay.
lighting.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so if we continue to go down into the ordinance here, we'd have a point, item B, which would be called home and landscape lighting. And so this would be referring to porch lights, security lights, landscape lighting, all those types of things. This, we just say all lighting shall be shielded and directed to illuminate only the areas in use. So if it's a security light, maybe it illuminates the side of my house or my door or wherever I'm concerned about. But the idea is you don't want that light being projected at your neighbor's house or on, it should be directed to where it's needed on your property.
So the
And
measure
you'll notice,
I'm sorry, the
Oh.
increment that you use for the foot candles, is that kind of a standard, the 0.1 foot candles for light trespass?
that is what we've used in our ordinance.
Before, okay.
But I couldn't say if that's a standard or anything like that.
I'll make a
That's
motion,
that's a great.
Okay,
I make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-19 as proposed.
is
I'll
there a
second.
second? Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Any
So,
questions or
yeah,
discussions?
A
Yes.
question, as you
Thank you.
brought something up right there. Have we even seen what that looks like? If you take a meter and you say, hold it up, because your neighbor has their lights on in their bedroom and you're 10 feet away from their house, because they have their house 10 feet to the property line, and you're in your yard and you hold up that light meter and their bedroom light is on, and have we seen what 1 foot candle is? Have we seen that?
Point
Huh?
0.1.
0.1.
Or 0.1.
Yeah.
I'm just a little concerned on the home one, that we don't really know what that looks like, that if someone has their lights on in their bedroom and
Do you not have shades in your bedroom?
I'm just
I'm
saying.
assuming that's not gonna be an issue.
Well, or it's a porch light across the street and then across the street,
And it
there's a
comes
0.1.
over to,
But I'm guessing if that ends up being super strict, we'll need to revisit this.
Yeah. so,
But
yeah,
I'm guessing.
can we go ahead and
We've
and
used it
pass
in-
this
yeah.
and
We can
and
revisit.
then
If we need to revise it,
Shane is already gonna bring in a meter, buy a meter. They're only $30.
Okay,
And
So-
we're gonna see,
are there any other questions? If no, if there's no other discussion or questions, let's do a roll call vote starting from Lon Lon.
yes,
Kelly Law, yes.
Craig Gordon, yes.
Jason Thielen, yes.
Jessica?
Jessica Smeon, yes.
Okay, item C, approval of landscape lighting for a roundabout. Is that Shane or is that Austin?
Me.
Okay,
So we got quotes to go along with the roundabout. What's that?
Just gotta make sure it's not getting interrupted in my office. How did he-
I had the thought I should put this on before the other item, but I thought that would be actually a dirty trick. So I went ahead and so we got quotes. We actually got this quote a while back and had them update it, and it didn't go up as much as I thought it would, but for 2 different options on landscape lighting for the roundabout. There's possibly a little bit of salvageable material there, but a lot of it, especially the fixtures, have reached their useful life. As part of the landscape, re-landscaping of the roundabout, we wanted to redo the landscape lighting. So there's 2 options here. One is essentially what we had there before, just the 1 color, non-programmable lights. The other option, which is a little more money, would allow it to be programmed from pretty much any device through an app. I think I talked to Lon last time we got this quote, and this is good
Yeah, this is
product,
good.
right?
and what's the cost difference between
have
the
this
two?
in
It's
my
about
house.
14,000.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
Any
it's
questions?
12 and some change versus 26 and some
make a
change.
motion.
Question, when are the occasions when we might use this for multicolored lighting? I mean, so for Christmas, would we be using it because we're already lighting up those trees? I mean, maybe it adds too. Right?
So even at that, Greg, great question. I don't know that you will use it often, but the zone and dimming ability, you can lower the lights at a certain time. So lower the output, so you wouldn't have it as bright. The first bid is just a standard light, same brightness all the time.
Yeah.
You could set it to at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, dim down in the zone and dimming one. So
Where's the first bid, Lon? What page is that on?
it's
the next
after
one
the
down.
second bid.
Oh.
So it's a 12.8.
A few pages.
It's just in the
Okay,
first
so yeah,
order.
this first one is 26. and the next
Yeah,
one is
so I actually ran some numbers on that myself, and they might be just a little higher than I bid it, but they're right in there,
Okay,
right?
For
in there.
this.
Uh-huh.
so
But-
I'll entertain a motion.
So
Which ones do you guys want to approve for the roundabout?
yeah, I mean, I can imagine 4th of July, maybe there's a usage or
Yeah.
Halloween or thing, I don't know
Alpine Days,
exactly.
something different
Alpine
maybe.
days,
Yeah.
something special.
But then who's gonna change the lighting color? Because that's always the challenges with when we get those things.
Who's gonna
How does
change
that
it?
get?
Is
Yeah.
Cal doing that,
It
or-
would be somebody here at City Hall.
It's just an app,
Okay.
you just change
Yeah.
it with a push of a button. You can program different events, and then it just changes all the lights, just like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I move to approve option 2 for the landscape lighting at the roundabout for the cost of $26,736.20.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. We'll go into a roll call vote, starting with Councilman Lott.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm still looking at these two bids.
Kelly?
Sorry, I'm looking at the two.
Here, let's move on to Councilman Gordon.
Greg Gordon,
Oh.
yes.
Jason Thielen, yes?
Jessica?
I asked a question. So is it $14,000 more to have dimmable and changeable?
Yes,
Is that what I'm seeing?
yes,
Cool.
And I think timeable as well.
yes.
Oh, the other one's not. You're
Yeah,
not
so there-
able to put the other one on a timer?
You can put the other on a timer. It's on, I mean, it's almost like a mechanical
Okay.
timer.
But it doesn't dim. on
Does
it.
not
I got
dim.
it, yeah.
You said it, some,
Okay,
Jessica, what's your
that was
vote?
helpful.
huh?
That was helpful.
Jessica?
Jessica Smew, no.
Kelly?
Kelly Law, no.
Okay, the motion passes for option 2 with a 3-2 vote.
And I have to apologize. I have a hard cutoff at 9 PM tonight.
No,
I
I'm
do.
sorry. No, you
I
don't.
do.
No, you don't.
I do.
No, you don't. You
Mayor,
need to stay.
can we go into executive session and then come back for staff
Yes, and then
reports?
you can leave, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Will you please move?
So I make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss litigation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
It needs to be a roll call actually
Roll
on this
call
one.
vote, starting from Lon.
Lon, yes.
Kelly Law, yes.
Greg Gordon, yes.
Jason Thielen, yes.
Jessica?
Jessica Smew, yes.
Okay. Let's, what do we need
Yeah,
to
let's
do?
get going.
We
Get you
gotta
out of here.
we gotta get this recording done. You are such a liar.
Hey, Jason, it's okay. You don't need to be called out on it. We should all be gone by 9.
Austin, what do we need to do?
Thank you, Bonnie. What do we need to do for executive session? Austin has to go. So that we're not last.
Okay, are we ready?
I'll just real briefly, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Hiram.